Tuesday, October the 13th. The time is 10 a.m. It's my pleasure to call the order of the State of Tennessee Department of Commerce and Insurance Board of Funeral Directors and Embalmers. Ms. Lisa Mosley, will you please call the roll?
Mark Carthon,
Here.
Robert Helms,
Here.
David Neal,
Here.
W.T. Patterson, Robert Starkey,
Here.
Anita Taylor.
Here.
Mr. President, we have a quorum.
Thank you. We have a quorum. We'll now continue with the meeting. If we will adopt the agenda, meeting agenda.
So move. Second.
Have a motion from Mr. Ham, second from Mr. Neal. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Meeting agenda is adopted. Next is a tribute to Board Member Jane Gray Bunny Sow, who passed away on Monday. And valuable member of our board and spoke her mind, and I think she truly could be called a funeral director's funeral director. I don't know, sadly missed by our board.
Miss Sal had served earlier on the board back in the mid to late 80s. She served a term on the board, or part of a term at that time, and then she was appointed in January of 2012 for this time. And of course, as you know, she was a continuing education liaison for the board, and Miss Lisa Mosby and she worked real well and real close together in that way. Miss Mosby would fax the documents to her, and she would review them and send them back, sign them and send them back in a good order. And she did that just like she did everything else. Miss Sal, I thought the speakers at the funeral service very appropriately said that she wanted things to be exactly right, and if she that's the way she handled all of her business, even down to signing those forms and sending them back. And certainly comes from a family of a long tradition in funeral service, and she, as you said, Mr. President, she'll be sadly missed by the board. In the time that I've served as an executive director, this is the first time we've had a sitting board member to pass away. It's that we all are involved in funeral service understand and know that it can happen anywhere, anytime, any place. But as Ms. Taylor said in the email back to me, it's when it's on, it still affects us differently than it does. I guess it's just more reality to us. It's more, it's something we have to acknowledge and recognize. And Mr. Dennis Hamilton and Miss Ellery Richardson and I were thankful that we had the opportunity to attend the funeral services from the department here and be there for the funeral services.
Hey, notice we have her seat draped in black and her name tag, which I imagine we'll leave it that way for the continuation. Thank you very much. Next on our agenda, we'll look at the minutes.
Motion we adopt the minutes as printed.
Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Neal, second from Mr. Helms. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The next is the Assistant General Counsel of Regulatory Boards and Divisions for the presentation of agreed orders.
We have two litigators here to present. We'll start with Robin Ryan.
Good morning.
Sorry, we normally bring the other mic.
Yeah, but when we do hearings, I'm usually so loud I'm heard anyway. And this way I can see. Okay. All right. As I said, I've not appeared before you all before, and if you approve what I'm presenting today, I won't be appearing before you this year. We do have a hearing set for next month, but Ms. Richardson and Mr. Gribble have worked with me very hard in trying to get a proposed set of agreed orders on the matters I'm about to present to you. And then we had them reviewed by the Assistant Commissioner. This is for a set of 4 cases that were set to be heard next month. One of the cases will be dismissed because the facts we have actually don't really apply to that particular matter. And the other 3 are orders of compromise and settlement, of which the funeral director will agree to a summary suspension for 1 year, for a suspension for 1 year, and there'll be a civil penalty for $6,000, and for the 2 entities, it'll be $2,000 civil penalty. I would like to pass out these agreed orders and have you review them, and then answer any questions you might have about them. And then, if I can, get a vote about whether or not you would approve them. And what will happen at that point is I will get them signed by the attorneys for the funeral director and the entities. Then they will be filed with the APD, which is Administrative Procedures Division, and the matter will be closed. So, if possible, yes, and take one for you and Robert, so any questions?
All 3 different.
Yeah, they're all 3 different. As you are reviewing these, you will see they all contain the same set of facts, and let me give you a little bit of the background. The matter was originally opened by a former employee of these entities, and that former employee has lost his license. There are also some criminal charges. Now, that doesn't affect how we proceed things, but it does make him a little less believable as a person to report. But in our investigation, we think that we could prove some things in this matter and perhaps not others, but this is where the compromise is. Originally, the request was for a revocation of all the licenses, and so this is the compromise position. Again, Mr. Gribble and Mr. Richardson worked very hard with me in looking over all of the facts, what we can and can't anticipate proving and maybe having a problem proving, the history, etc., and these were the proposals we made. After reviewing them and after coming to these positions, we then presented them to the respondents' attorneys, and there were 3 attorneys on this particular matter, and they made absolutely some suggestions on fact statements, the way we had presented the facts. I get them from whatever's in the consent orders. So we made some agreements about facts, and they're all there. And then they were again reviewed by the Assistant Commissioner. There are 3 pre-need cases with the same set of facts with the Assistant Commissioner, and they are also, that has no impact here because they're not before you at all, but they've also been resolved. So this is for the position we are today. So I welcome any questions you might have, and I will be happy to answer them. If you want to ask Robert or Ellery about these particular matters, that's fine too.
Are we doing them as a whole or on each?
As a whole.
Okay.
These are all as a whole. If they are not accepted as a whole, then we start over and have a full hearing on all of them.
All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We ask some questions.
Please.
Okay. Are these fines consistent with what's normally fined in cases like this?
Well, that's a question I think you'd have to address to Ms. Richardson, because they're penalties, and that would depend on the history. My recollection is that between she and Mr. Gribble, they determined, yes, these were consistent, but you need to address that to them.
Okay.
Yes, we did determine that this was fair in terms of what we've done in the past and the particular circumstances of this case.
Only involves the funeral director's license. Is that correct? Not an embalmer's license, not any kind of pre-need seller license, nothing like that then?
The pre-need seller license that was the open case that is with the assistant commissioner, and that has been settled or will be with this group.
And while it, again, should have no bearing on your determinations here, that particular license will be suspended for a year as well. But back to the question about the other licenses, the suspension only affects the individual, not the institutions. The institutions are paying civil penalties.
And the suspension is just for his funeral director's license, his embalmer's license. Some of the civil penalties will go towards that. Then, as you can see, the facts don't really touch on embalming.
Do you know when the transaction was canceled and the automobile was returned?
Yes, it was returned almost immediately. It was returned to when the former grandfather-in-law complained about it. I think it was returned almost as a result of his complaint. Is that your recollection?
I remember there was a news article about
Yeah.
it, and after the news article came out,
It-
that's when he returned it. I don't recall exactly the time difference between when he received the car and when he returned it. I do not remember.
In regards to the substitution of like and similar merchandise, it looks like it's noted that that employee that was doing that has been dismissed.
Yes.
My question is this a practice that they continue?
Not to my knowledge.
Or was it condoned or was it encouraged?
Not to my knowledge, but that again would be a fact that would come out in the trial, but based on what the information I have, not to my knowledge.
Is that one of y'all's main points in your investigation?
Oh, in the investigation, I think the main points were, this was following a fire, okay? A former employee, a disgruntled former employee filed this to begin with. And then it was investigated. And I think in the course of the investigation, it was determined that we had a number of people that said some things happened and other people said that nothing happened. So absolute final proof of any of it, I don't have, it would come out in the trial.
But it's your position, we're better off doing this versus the hearing?
Yes.
As far as one suggestion was to hire or appoint a manager for each establishment. I noticed that Laura Blevins was the manager. Is she eligible?
Any person would be eligible for the period of time his license was suspended. His daughter is a director in one of the establishments, not in one of them. But, go ahead, Ellery.
Oh, no, you're right. I was just
Okay.
thinking.
And any licensed person would be eligible to do that. And whether or not that person continued after the license was renewed or reestablished, that would be up to him.
So Lauren is his daughter.
Yes.
Okay.
Understanding we can't recommend any changes to these orders, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, either yes or no. Okay.
That's right.
It mentioned in here somewhere, and I've just missed it, that, I mean, have there been any previous violations by this
That is not
establishment? Is that,
under your consideration.
okay. I mean, I'm just curious if it was mentioned in here.
No, it's not mentioned in there, but you can't consider that anyway.
Okay.
Make a motion to accept the recommendations of council on the three matters.
Second.
Have a motion from Mr. Helms, second from Mr. Neal. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. In this case, do we need to do a roll call, or since it's all passed, or times in hearings we do? But
I don't
okay.
believe so, no.
All right.
Thank you very much. Hope to see you again.
Okay, Denard Mickens is the next litigating attorney up.
My name is Denard Mickens. I'm one of the litigating attorneys for the department, and today I'm here to present an agreed order. In the it was originally for, let's see, which complaint number was that? But anyway, the respondent in this case was Thurman Funeral Home. We were originally set to have this case heard on September the 8th at the September board meeting, but the parties had discussed a settlement, and I think that you all have an electronic version of this, the agreed order, on your iPads. If not, I can try to get paper copies run off very quickly, I thought. This case involved arose out of an inspection, actually way back in 2011. There were the random sampling showed that a couple of the the funeral goods and services contracts, there were slight overcharges. One was for an overcharge of $50. And then one was a failure to provide an itemized goods and services list. Like I said, it was just a routine inspection. So we have settled that case. We had charged them with a violation of Tennessee Code Annotated 62-5-317 B17, which is a mouthful, but it's just covers failure to violations of rules, and so the failing to provide an itemized list, failing to have their paperwork all in order was enough to kind of get them a violation. We settled. There is a settlement in the agreed order for those violations of $250, and so working with Ms. Richardson, Mr. Gribble, and also with the opposing attorney, I highly recommend this deal. It's a good deal, and for $250 or $500 to spend the time to do a full hearing on that would seem to be a waste of limited resources. So.
It says here $450.
Yes, that includes whenever we file a case with the Secretary of State, they charge us a $200 filing fee.
Oh, okay.
So if any parties agree to settle after charges have been filed, we require them to pay it.
Make a motion to accept the agreed order.
Second.
Have a motion from Mr. Helms, a second from Ms. Taylor. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Starkey, may I just have it.
I believe that is all the agreed orders we have. Yes, that one we're double checking on. I don't believe that one would need to be represented. We're double checking. We believe it's for the same amount that was previously authorized, in which case you don't need to reapprove it. But we have a paralegal double checking on that one.
Next order of business will be the legal report from our attorney, Ellery Richardson.
All right, the first case is case number 2015-013-871. Complainant states that the funeral director was either completely unprepared or not qualified to handle the service. There were not enough printed programs, and the funeral director announced the wrong name of the deceased. After the service concluded, complainant's son had to go get the funeral director to inform her that the service was over. After the service, the casket was lowered into the crypt with a loud thump, and she is worried that it was damaged. Complainant states that the service was fully paid for beforehand and it was an embarrassment to her on top of her grief. Respondent states that the funeral director was a new employee. They ran out of copies of programs and they did not have time to print more. She did step away and was not immediately available at the conclusion of the service. My recommendation would be to close with a letter of caution directed towards this new employee.
Motion to accept.
Second.
Have a motion from Ms. Taylor, a second from Mr. Cochran. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Right, the next case is case number 2015-016-021. Complainant alleges that it took respondent far too long to ship the deceased from Dallas, Texas. Complainant also alleges that the obituary was not in the paper until the day of the service, which was a Thursday, and the secretary told her that she thought the funeral was on Friday. The confusion led to many people missing the funeral because they didn't know it was Thursday. Some even came to the funeral home on Friday looking for the service. There were also many errors in the program because respondent did not have it ready in time for complainant to view it beforehand. Complainant also alleges there were no funeral directors present for the service. The only two people present were a minister with alcohol on his breath and an assistant. Additionally, complainant wants the insurance policy to go to the balance of the service. An investigation revealed that the Dallas medical examiner released the deceased 2 days after death, and he was transported by air 2 days after that for 4 days total. It appears that the funeral director was present for the service, but he admits to keeping a low profile because of strife with the family. The investigation also revealed that the beneficiaries of the policy did not want the policy to be used for the funeral services. So my recommendation would be to close with a letter of instruction. It does appear that there was some confusion about the date of the service, but it's not necessarily a legal violation.
Motion to accept.
Second.
Have a motion from Mr. Helms, a second from Mr. Neal and Ms. Taylor. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Is case number 2015-013-401. It's the funeral director. Funeral home reports that one of their now former funeral directors has been taking checks and depositing them into his personal account. They show proof that he opened his own account as, I'm just going to say X, so I don't give out his last name, as X Funeral Home, and added a doing business as of the respondent funeral home's name, or of his own name, excuse me. Upon confrontation, respondent admitted to, I wrote this wrong. He added a doing business as the complainant, like the establishment's name, so he could cash checks that were written to respondent, or to the complainant. Upon confrontation, respondent admitted to this practice and told the funeral home that he could not guess how many checks he had done this with. Respondent states that this is a civil dispute. Complainant has found 60 checks for a total of $122,613.18 from November 2013 through the present. Respondent was arrested on September 15th for theft, and to our knowledge, he is still sitting in jail. So my recommendation would be revocation of his license and authorization for a hearing.
Motion to accept.
Second.
Have a motion from Mr. Helms and a second from Ms. Taylor. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Right. The next case is case number 2015-012-701. Funeral home stated that they received a call from an extremely distressed pre-need customer who described a situation when a representative from respondent had been to her house. The representative told them that their pre-need contract with complainant was no good and would not cover a cremation. The representative was pushy and rude and did not stop the solicitation after the customer informed him that she already had a pre-need policy, which complainant believes to be the law. Respondent states that had this occurred, it would have violated their policies. I spoke with the consumer on the phone. The consumer stated that the salesman was pushy, but he was just trying to make a sale. He didn't consider him rude, and the consumer just said it wasn't a huge deal and he'd rather just have it closed.
Motion to accept.
Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Neal, a second from Mr. Cochran. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
The next case is case number 2015-014-921. Respondent's establishment license expired on February 28, 2015, and was not reinstated until March 13, 2015. Respondent conducted one arrangement during this unlicensed time. Respondent states that he mailed the renewal on February 26th, but it did not arrive in the board office until March 2nd. On March 11th, they received a call stating that their renewal was late and they needed to pay a late fee. Respondent states that they thought the renewal had gone through on time until they got a call 9 days later. In these types of situations, the renewal, we always tell them to renew at least 15 days early to avoid things like this. But my recommendation would be a letter of warning because of the situation with our office.
Motion to accept.
Second.
Have a motion from Ms. Taylor, a second from Mr. Neal. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
The next case is case number 2015-018-411. Complainant's brother-in-law, Wade, didn't get an actual number. Throughout the case, there were different variations, but somewhere between 700 and 800 pounds when he passed away. They believed that respondent had a facility large enough to store him. When they came in, they found that he had not been embalmed and not kept in the freezer. The deceased had already bought a plot, but respondent and the cemetery both told them that he was too large from a normal burial and needed to be cremated against his wishes, especially because of the decomposition. Complainant also alleges that the staff made fun of the deceased and his weight. Respondent states that due to his size, the deceased would not fit in their cooler, and they needed help from the fire department to move him into the prep room. They attempted to embalm him, but the authorization was not given for several days, and by that point, the deceased had tissue gas and other high rates of decomposition. The embalmer stated that they attempted to embalm him through the femoral artery but could not reach the artery with their equipment due to the size of his thigh. After complainant shopped around, they found a crematory able to handle the cremation, and respondent coordinated transport. My recommendation would be to close. Questions?
Does it state at what point that the deceased bought the plot?
It does not state, but it was prior to his death. And that was something the cemetery said that they could not accommodate him.
They told him that.
Yes, they told his
Okay.
family that at the time of death.
Oh, at the time of death, but not at the time that he purchased the plot.
I did not speak to the cemetery directly about this, but it appeared that it had been purchased, years ago.
Do we know how many days passed from the authorization to embalm to the point of death?
If I remember correctly, it was about 3 days, but he had been dead for at least several hours before they found him.
Did they give a reason why the family didn't give authorization right away? Why it took them so long?
I think there was just a lot of stress in coordinating, just because a lot of funeral homes can't accommodate someone that large. So this appears to be, a very unfortunate situation where there was a lot of stress, but I don't believe, y'all understand this better than I do, that the funeral home necessarily did any legal violation. They attempted to embalm him, they tried to do these things, but just under the circumstances, they were not able to.
Motion to accept council's recommendation.
Second.
I have a motion from Ms. Taylor and a second from Mr. Helms. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
The next case is case number 2015-018-421. Local funeral home agreed to a reduced price trade call direct cremation with respondent, who told him that all the family was in Virginia. He told respondent that they would need to have the family sign his cremation authorization form because respondent's form would not be sufficient. When he arrived to pick up the body, the family was there, and he learned that respondent had lied to him about the trade call and the family living in Virginia. He explained this to the family, and the brother stated that he wanted to use complainant anyway, but his sister-in-law found respondent online with a cheaper price of about $700. Complainant told the family he would still do the cremation, but since respondent was getting the money, respondent would have to pull all the necessary permits and do all the paperwork. Respondent did not return phone calls from complainant or the family. No paperwork ever came, so the family ended up writing a contract with complainant, although the funeral home, to keep goodwill, stuck with the greatly reduced price. Luckily, the family had not yet paid respondent. Respondent called complainant again a few weeks later with another deceased, and complainant told them he couldn't help them. This is the same respondent we discussed the last meeting where we had referred this respondent to the Attorney General's office for injunction and all the relief they can do. So my recommendation would be to add this case to that referral.
Second.
Have a motion from Mr. Neal and a second from Mr. Helms. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
The next case is case number 2015-019-201. Respondent did not have a copy on file of the latest inspection of the crematory they use, and their general price list listed a funeral director who is not affiliated. Respondent did not have a casket price list, an outer burial price list, and 2 required items on the general price list were missing. As a response, respondent submitted proof that they corrected all of the errors. And since there is no history, my recommendation would be a consent order with $250 and authorization for a hearing.
Motion to accept.
Second.
Have a motion from Mr. Helms, second from Ms. Taylor. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Next case is case number 2015-019-481. Respondent's license lapsed and was invalid for 25 days before it was renewed. Respondent handled 14 cases during this time period. Respondent manager states that he was out of the country at the time and apologized for the oversight. My recommendation would be a consent order with a civil penalty of $700 and authorization for a hearing.
Accept council's recommendation.
Second.
Have a motion from Ms. Taylor and a second from Mr. Helms? Yes. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
One more case. This is a represent case number 2011-013-471. The complaint alleged unlicensed activity. Respondent appears to be a society, consumers organization, referral group, something of that type. Upon further review, respondent's website is clear that they contract with local funeral homes to provide funeral goods and services. Therefore, I do not believe that unlicensed activity is taking place or that the consumer is being misled, because their website is clear in that. So my recommendation would be to close with a letter of caution, just explaining to them just to be careful.
Motion to accept.
Second.
Have a motion from Mr. Neal, a second from Ms. Taylor. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
That concludes the legal report.
All right. Next will be the director's report, Robert Grove.
Thank you, Mr. President. First thing I want to present to the board is the budget report. This is a recap for the fiscal year July 1, 2014 through June 30, 2015. Financial data was provided to the board's office by the Assistant Commissioner's Office for Regulatory Boards on October the 6th for use in compilation of this report. As you'll recall, the beginning balance and reserve on July 1, 2014 was $1,066,326. Also, as you'll recall that we've spoken about before, on the odd-numbered years because of our license and when they expire, the revenue to the board is decreased greatly on the odd number of years, which is just the year that we just finished, and then it goes up substantially on the even numbered years. So the net revenue or earnings for this period was $484,416, which made total funds available of $1,550,742. The expenditures for this period was $387,109. And then the cost backs, these are cost allocations charged to the board from the administration and investigation. And this year, something is different. The administration actually includes the legal part. Prior to this year, we've had 3 separate charges, one from administration, one from legal, and one from investigation. But this year, administration and legal are combined, and then there's a separate charge for investigation. And also, you'll recall that probably the assistant commissioner will appear before you sometime after the first of the year, but I know we're board changed, so I wanted to bring this information to you today. And usually when the assistant commissioner appears before you, then they discuss these numbers in greater detail. And I'll be glad to answer any questions you have that you would have today. But for cost backs, administration, which does include legal for this period, was $173,901. Investigation cost was $6,568. Most of our investigations are done by Roy Bozeman, who is an employee of the board, but there are times that the investigative section of the regulatory board, which is a different part than obviously the funeral board, that they do the investigations, and this $6,568 is a charge made by the investigative section. So that total cost backs was $180,468, which total expenditures including cost backs was $567,577, which leaves a reserve balance on July the 1st of 2015 of $983,166. And I footnoted there because if you do the math on this, it's going to be off $1. And what happens, I made it mirror the information that we'd received from the assistant commissioner's office, from their accounting manager, and in rounding numbers up and down at different times, sometimes these will be off $1. I went back and looked. Last year they weren't, but 2 years ago, so it may just be on the odd numbered years. 2 years ago it was off $1. If you do the math, it would come out $983,165, but all the official reports show $983,166. So I made this to match that, so that there wouldn't be any difference there. If you have questions, I'll be glad to answer any question you have regarding the budget and the finances and the expenditures for last year. Next item is a legislative update. Of course, the legislature will not be back in session until January, so I don't have any update to present to the understanding that maybe some associations may be working on some legislation that may affect the board. And as I mentioned to you before, anytime there's a bill introduced, the bill comes over and the legal department does a legislative analysis of that, and we look at it as to what expenses it's going to be to the board, if any, and do a physical note for that. But obviously we don't have any of those yet, and it will be late December, early January usually before we receive any type of bills for that. Bills the legislature has introduced. The licensee report, this is a report of licenses administratively approved by the executive director pursuant to the board's authority for the period of August 11, 2015 through October 12, 2015. You have a list of the establishments and individuals there. Closed establishment report. Since the last board meeting, we have 2 establishments that have reported closing. Dusty Rose Cremations and Memorial Services LLC, 5100 Poplar Avenue, Suite 2729 in Memphis, and Ford Funeral Home located at 230 Stonewall Street in Jackson. Action report for this meeting. This is a report of the consent orders administratively accepted or approved pursuant to the board's authority for the period of August 1, 2015 through September 30, 2015. And we have one listed there, and that was the one that actually the board was presented to the board at our last meeting, and the board approved, and that's been. As far as complaint report, this is the number of complaints. Ms. Mosby prepared this yesterday. As far as apprentices, we have 1 complaint. Funeral director and embalmers, we have 8 complaints. And establishments, we have 23 complaints for a total of 32 complaints. President, that concludes my report.
Motion, we accept the director's report as printed.
Have a motion from Mr. Neal and a second from Ms. Taylor. All in favor? Motion carries. Next will be the approval of license application by the board members. Individuals first.
Mr. President, we've got, first of all, John David Ball from Marion, Arkansas, who is a reapplicant for a funeral director and embalmer. He once held a license here in Tennessee as both a funeral director and embalmer. So, Mr. Ball, would you want to tell the board a little bit about yourself? And there's some information there that's on your iPad you may want to review. We'll just give the board a brief history about yourself, Mr. Ball.
My name is John Ball. First of all, I would like to thank you all for allowing me to come here this morning to meet before. I'm coming before you to ask you to please reinstate my funeral directors and embalmers license in the state. I just kind of give you a brief cap of my past. I began the funeral industry in 1998 with Roller Citizens Funeral Home in West Memphis, Arkansas. And I worked for them through December of '04, where due to my poor choices in life and my addictive personality, I became addicted to methamphetamines. And due to that and my inability to get to work on time, my employment was terminated due to tardies, excessive tardies. I remained out of the industry. I'm still unemployed in the industry at this time. My poor choices, I had some serious consequences, in which time I have done, was incarcerated in the Mississippi Department of Corrections for a term of 18 months. A very low point in my life to where my family pretty much disowned me. I was homeless, and make poor choices, which kept me in my lowest point in my life. To the point to where I hit rock bottom, to where I decided I had to make a change, because if nothing changes, nothing changes, and it was all on me. I do suffer from the disease of addiction. I am quite aware of that. I have been in recovery now since April the 1st of 2010. I'm very active in my local NA group in West Memphis, Arkansas, which is like miles west of Memphis, Tennessee. I guess 2 or 3 years ago, I began to look into getting my license renewed in the state of Arkansas, and at which point I went before them as well, as I'm doing today, where they allowed me to retake the test, and upon my passing of the test and paying their fines that they put on me, my license would be reinstated, and that's what I've done. And since I live 10 miles from Memphis, I'm trying to get my license back in the state of Tennessee to where I can seek employment in Memphis, closer to my home. And that's what I'm here for today, and I'm very honored you allowed me to come here. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask, and I'll answer them to the best of my ability.
say you're in the process of getting your license in Arkansas, or that's already been done?
It's already been done.
So you do have your license in Arkansas?
Yes, ma'am. They are active as we speak.
Okay.
Funeral directors and embalmers license.
Mr. President, I'd point out to the board that we have a typo on this. It should be seeking licensure as a funeral director and embalmer by reapplication. I have a reciprocity from Mississippi there. I'm sorry, that's a typo. It has nothing. He's never been licensed in Mississippi. It has nothing to do with that. But he was once licensed here in Tennessee, and it's where he's seeking his license.
Basically, Mr. Ball, you've been clean since 2010?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
March the 30th of that year, I was incarcerated, and that's when I decided that I needed to make a change. And I was in Jonesboro, Arkansas, in which I had a friend of mine call a sober living in Little Rock, which is a long-term treatment facility, very structured, 18-month, long-term. Time that I entered there, and I remained there for the term of 18 months. And at which time, after that, I decided to stay there because it was good for me. You know, my life was turning around. I could see positive results. And I didn't see that I needed to make a change. I mean, there wasn't any reason to at that time. I stayed there until July of this year. I was a staff member for the remaining 3 years there. Counselor, and would do NA groups and AA groups at that time at that facility. I was employed with a company called Blue One USA out of Atlanta, Georgia, and they had a plant in Little Rock, their only plant actually, where we built diesel exhaust fluid tanks. Well, make a long story short, Christmas of last year, they decided they were going to up and move the plant to Atlanta to kind of be in their backyard, if you would say. And it wasn't, I didn't feel like it was best for me to move down there with them. So my employment with them ended on July the 24th of this year, at which time I, have been unemployed at that time. Now, I have been eagerly searching funeral homes in Memphis online, but in my opinion, it was not wise for me to go apply for a job there without having my active license. I didn't want to say, okay, well, this is where I'm at, and I'm going to do this in a couple of weeks. I had rather have all my paperwork in order. If y'all see fit to reinstate them, then I will pursue it at that time.
Went to sober living. Did you do that voluntarily?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Because of my already of placing myself in that facility, the charges that were pending at that time when I went before the court, they decided, okay, he's here. Instead of incarcerating him, we'll give him that opportunity, per se, to complete the program and a probation period beginning on that day of 3 years, at which time it began, and I served all of that time there, as well as the post probationary period that was in the state of Mississippi.
Record been expunged?
Due to the fact that I have more than one felony.
Said you had to retake the test in Arkansas. Was that just the law test, or?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. It was a law test.
Mr. Gerbil, if we reinstated his license, could we require him to take the law test, or would that be out of order?
He's already done that.
Oh, he has,
Yeah,
okay.
He's already done that.
He's already done that,
Yes,
okay.
sir. He meets all the qualifications
Oh,
for approval for relicensure pending your determination regarding TCA 625317.
Letters of recommendation are very special.
I'll make a motion to reinstate his license.
Second.
have a motion from Ms. Taylor, a second from Mr. Helms. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations.
Next person is Jennifer Patrick Tillman. Applicant is seeking licensure today as a funeral director and embalmer by reciprocity from Mississippi. And based upon her applications, the board might want to look at 62-5-311B3, which is, as you're aware, whenever we have a situation where it involves the five years, then those situations come before the board for the board review.
I was sitting here earlier listening to what Mr. Gribble said about Miss Sowell and how special that was, and hopefully one day those sweet words will be spoken about me too. I've been licensed in Mississippi since 1996. My husband and I married at that time, and he was a licensed funeral director and embalmer, and his dream was always to own his own funeral home, so it made sense for me to be part of that. So I went to mortuary school, graduated top of my class, and we owned and operated 5 funeral homes in Mississippi up until 2006, and we also had 2 in Tennessee. 2006, we dissolved our partnership with our partner at that time, and I stepped out of the business for a while. Michael remained active in Mississippi and Tennessee. I stepped out and had our son and stayed at home with him for several years. I did keep my Mississippi license active because I knew one day we would be back in the funeral business as a team. We moved to Tennessee in 2009, and I opened a flower shop and owned and operated that flower shop until January of this year, and I sold that to an employee of mine. Michael and I bought Peebles Fayette County Funeral Homes and Cremation Center in Somerville and Oakland, June of last year. And I ran the flower shop while he handled the funeral home, and we quickly saw that I needed to be there at the funeral home with him. So I took the law exam, the Tennessee law exam, in August of this year, and I'm here before you now to
Will you repeat what we're looking at, considering again?
Basically, the 5 years of licensure prior to, and serving as a funeral director and embalmer prior to the application. It's
Is she short?
62-5-311B3, counselor.
I've kept my Mississippi license active. I've handled several funerals in Mississippi for Peebles Funeral Home since Michael's been employed there since 2000. So I did help because he was the only licensed Mississippi funeral director and embalmer for Peebles Funeral Homes, and we're right close to the Mississippi line. And so oftentimes, for price, Mississippi families will use Peebles Funeral Home, and so that allowed me an opportunity to still keep my Mississippi license active. And then I think you should have a copy. Brantley Phillips Funeral Home in Hernando, Mississippi. That was my hometown, so I've helped them throughout the past several years.
So you have been active kind of on a call-in basis during this time,
Sir, that's
for
correct.
most part.
Pertinent part of that, Ms. Taylor, that you were asking about is that the non-resident applicant has been licensed by another state or provincial authority in good standing for 5 years and has been employed as a funeral director or embalmer or both for such time.
I think one of the things we have to take into consideration too, because she was licensed since 1996,
Correct, yes, sir.
so that's a long. Prior to that, so.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Have a motion from Mr. Hams, a second from Ms. Taylor. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Kenneth A. Abercrombie Sr. from Loretta, Tennessee. This is an application for funeral director by reciprocity from Alabama. And again, this should be, he's seeking licensure as a funeral director only, not as a funeral director and embalmer, but just as a funeral director by reciprocity from Alabama. And for the same reason, same statute, Mr. Abercrombie's before you today. If you want to, Ken, tell the board a little bit about yourself.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to address this board today. I am from Loretta, Tennessee. That's in extreme southern middle Tennessee, just 20 miles below Mr. Neal over there. We're right on the Tennessee-Alabama state line. I grew up in Loretta, went to college at what's now the University of North Alabama. Got my degree there, and totally unlike Mr. Starkey, I peddled caskets for a number of years, but he got smarter quicker than I did and got out. But I owned a casket manufacturing company, Loretta Casket Company. Was there for 38 years. Sold it in 1998. Continued for a couple of years in a management contract. In 2000, my son John, who's also here today, built a funeral home in Green Hill, Alabama. That's just a couple of minutes south of the Tennessee-Alabama state line on Highway 43, just north of Florence. Being that close to Tennessee, naturally, we do some Tennessee business. And let me add that we do have a licensed Tennessee person on our staff. But it seemed that a lot of times when we had a service going into Tennessee, is his day off. So we've decided to address that situation also. I am passionate about funeral service. It's the most self-satisfying thing I've ever done in my life, helping people through one of their most difficult and traumatic times. So many times people say, help me, I don't know what to do. I've never done this before. So I have been licensed in Alabama for some 10 years plus. Took it, and so I'm here.
You've been licensed since 1988?
2010, I believe.
Make a motion, we accept.
Second.
Have a motion from Mr. Neal, a second from Mr. Helms. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Congratulations, Ken.
Next person is John Christopher Abercrombie, who is also seeking licensure as a funeral director by reciprocity from Alabama. you want.
I'm John Abercrombie. I guess it's hard to follow his story there, but kind of in the same boat. I built the funeral home, and it's in August of 2000 we opened, and we're 2 miles from the Alabama-Tennessee state line. We're actually in Alabama. Of course, like he said, the manager of the funeral home actually holds a Tennessee and Alabama license. Worked under him since I started, and had my license, I think, since '03, which would be 12 years. And like I said, it just made sense for us to go ahead and see if we couldn't get our Tennessee license and make us a whole lot easier on us to cover Tennessee funerals.
Hardly fair to give your dad a license and not you, I don't
But
think.
not when I've been a funeral director longer than he has, actually.
That's right.
Motion to accept.
Second.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Have a motion from Ms. Taylor, a second from Mr. Helms. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Congratulations.
Going back to the agreed order, we just double checked, and it is for the exact same penalty that you had already approved, so we don't need to present it again.
All right. Do we have establishments next, or are there? Yeah.
There are not any establishments, applications to come before you today.
All right. Next would be since we have lost our continuing education liaison. Appoint another board member for the next 3 months. Through December 31st.
December 31st of this year. What that entails is when providers are submitting applications, Ms. Mosby receives those applications, reviews them, and then she prepares a cover letter with her recommendation. I review the application and sign that letter, and then or cover sheet, and it's then sent, transmitted to the board member who is the continuing education liaison. If the board member has any questions about it or wants to review further documents, well, the board member lets Ms. Mosby know, and if they're in agreement, then they sign that as well and send it back to her, and then at that point, she sends a letter to the provider saying that your course and list of courses have been approved for X number of hours, or your course has been disapproved for whatever reason it's been.
Basically, your office does all the legwork, heavily screens it, and have you ever kicked some out before have you happened in the past?
Well, we recommend some denials, but that
Okay.
denial does not take place unless the board member agrees with it.
Okay.
We don't just arbitrarily decide we can't approve this. It comes as a recommendation to the continuing liaison, whoever the board member is, as a recommendation to deny it, and the reason is listed for what. The two most common reasons to deny one is because whatever their let's say if they submitted a 2-hour course for watercoloring, I don't think that has sufficient reason to be approved for continuing education for a funeral director and embalmer. And that's an extreme example, but sometimes we get courses that are very close to that, that has no relevance to, the law and rules set out what the courses should be about, what areas they should cover. And then the other thing is sometimes they're not submitted within the 60 days or prior to 60 days before the course is scheduled to take place. Those are typically the things that we recommend denial for.
We need a motion from someone, for someone.
I would recommend Mr. David Neal.
have Mr. David Neal recommended.
Second.
Okay.
Sorry.
We have a recommendation from Ms. Taylor, a second from Mr. Cochran. All in favor?
Aye.
Congratulations, Mr. Neal. You're the new continuing agent. Do we have any new business to come before the board? Business, we'll ask for an adjournment.
So moved.
Have a motion from Ms. Taylor and a second from Mr. Neal. All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.